The Everything Apartments podcast is provided with support from the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, better known as AGLA, serving residential landlords throughout Southern California through education and advocacy. Visit aagla.org. Welcome to the Everything Apartments podcast. I'm your host, Eric.christopher, and on this podcast, we discuss all topics of multifamily investments, from buying and financing properties, day-to-day operations and management, and also reinvestment strategies. One of the biggest challenges we as apartment owners and managers face is delinquent or unruly tenants and how to process them out. And typically that's going to involve an eviction. And it's become so difficult and so costly here in California, and specifically LA County, to do an eviction. And we'll talk about kind of a nightmare scenario that I'm personally going through right now. Many of you may have heard of or dipped your toe in the water with regard to cash for keys, or a more official terminology might be a tenant buyout. And simply stated, it's just a matter of a negotiation with the tenant that will provide them a sum of money and get them out of the unit in a much faster fashion than an eviction. Evictions can go many, many months. You have an outstanding balance that you'll probably never collect. And certainly you're going to pay a fair ransom in attorney's fees. So at the end of the day, it may be more cost effective, even though it feels like you're going to the dentist and getting a tooth pulled, to stroke a check to this tenant who hasn't been paying you. It really sucks you right in your pride, but it may be the faster and more economical way to get rid of a tenant that needs to leave. We have a really great guest today that specializes in tenant buyouts and kind of show you how to do that, and may be able to even help you do it in a little more efficient way. But first, I'll tell you about our firm, WSC Realty Advisors and WSC Property Management. WSC has been helping buyers and sellers and also managing properties in Long Beach for over 17 years now. Let's say you're just kind of tired of managing your own units and you want to have more free time and travel with the mental comfort that your properties are being managed well in your absence. Or let's say you have a manager in place now and just the performance that they are providing just doesn't match up with your expectations. We can definitely help you. We've got systems in place that have addressed a lot of those concerns and have a very high satisfaction rate with our clients. We also stay a little smaller and more agile to bring you the quality that you want and deserve. We can also help you if you're looking to acquire more units here, or maybe an out-of-state scenario where you do a 1031 exchange. A lot of people doing that now to kind of get out of the California market. And certainly I've got a network that can help you do that in certain different markets across the country. So visit WSC-PM.com, call, text, or email us. All that information is in the show notes. And certainly if you're watching on YouTube, it's right over my shoulder. Mention the Everything Apartments podcast and get your first 2 months of management absolutely free. Whatever your challenge with your property, WSC has the solution. Today, we have with us Sasha Struthers. Sasha is an attorney here in the LA area, but unlike an eviction attorney, she actually specializes in cash for keys or tenant buyouts. This is, as I mentioned in the open, is a very pragmatic and cost-effective way to get a problem tenant out. And there's a specific process for doing that. More stringent in the city of LA. We talk a little bit about that, but certainly it can be applied to just about anywhere. If you dot your I's and cross your T's correctly, you can execute that plan pretty well. We'll go through that a little bit. Sasha, it's great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'm going to share a scenario with you that I'm currently going through, and I'm sure that hundreds, if not thousands, of landlords around Southern California are going through the good old eviction process.
Mhm.
And, make a long story short, the tenant owed, thousands of dollars. We finally decided, okay, we've got to get this person out. And through the progression of retainer fee, through the process of getting a court date. So what I've discovered in the last few of these is if they don't answer the complaint, great, you get summary judgment, you're done, more or less. But what I'm finding now with all of this free legal service that tenants are able to access, and oh, by the way, the landlord does not have that available,
Mhm.
that they will simply respond to the complaint and get a court date, but then it's very simple for them to request a jury trial all the while, the clock is ticking on the free rent because this is a months and months long waiting process. So I thought, great, I've spent $10,000 on an attorney. I have my jury trial set up for, I think it was about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. I get there, the attorney says, "Oh, you're getting continued till April 15th. There's really only one eviction judge available and blah, blah, blah." And I'm going, oh, yeah, sure. Why not another month of free rent? But here's what I found happens is you go to the jury trial. The jury trial is not going to happen. There's going to be a last minute negotiation, and the tenant counsel is going to say, "Oh, we'll be glad to settle this. We just want to stay for one additional month, another month, another month." Okay. Now that sounds crazy. I would normally want to say, "No, I want my jury trial. I want to, state my case in front of a jury of my peers." It's never going to happen. The fastest way to get the person out at that point is you say, "Okay, fine. You can stay another month." Why? Because the sheriff, if you won that case that day, he's not going to go out there to lock them out for at least 4 more weeks. So you might as well just agree on the month, have the court document that, and then go from there. But look what's happened. And I know this is kind of long-winded, but I'm teeing you up. That's $10,000 out of pocket plus lost rent and the period of time after, before they hand over the keys. Um, it's the most completely unproductive, costly process ever that I've witnessed in my life. And as time has gone by, tenant buyouts, or on the street called cash for keys, I've done a couple of those, sort of muddled my way through it. But from what I understand and the reading of the website of yours that I've went on, is the way to go. So tell me about the process and we can kind of go from there.
Yes. I learned what you learned 5 years ago when I got into landlord tenant law. And I was an attorney and I was helping a client manage some real estate and try to get it back on track. And then 5 years ago, evictions were not great, slightly better than they are today. And what it's come down to is exactly what you talked about. They file an answer, they then ask for a jury trial. You go to the first court date to find out that there's a jury trial. So then you have to set another court date. And these takes months and months because, the court systems in general in California are very backed up, and LA, obviously no exception to that. So what ends up happening is it's about a 4 to 6 month process. You can no longer, you're owed back rent. You can no longer collect any more rent from them because it voids your notice and your eviction. So now you have every month you're racking up this rent debt that tenants realize going through it. They'll delay. They're not paying rent. And ultimately they come to the same conclusion with, their free legal advice that even if the landlord loses at a trial, all this rent money is still going to be due. So we're going to be back here visiting this again at some point in the future. So then it becomes, we get face-to-face time with them and you decide, I'll waive all the back rent. I'll waive all the rent that's accumulated. I'll give you extra time. You move. And all that's extremely costly for the landlord because it's money you're never going to get back on top of money that you're shelling out. So what happens, and what kind of happened during COVID, was clients would come to me and they go, this tenant owes $35,000. I know they're working. They have a new car. They're there. They definitely could pay their rent. They were denied rent relief or they refused to do rent relief. We just want the unit back. And so a lot of deals were struck, and they will continue to be struck where it's like, hey, we can avoid the eviction court. I will just waive the rent. Some clients even pay the tenant money. Like, I'm going to pay an attorney or I could pay you, and let's agree to a move out date. So that's how sometimes these defaults work. That's one reason for cash for keys is like, if you have a tenant who owes a huge rent debt, forgive the rent debt, maybe give them a little money and get the unit much faster, avoiding the uncertainty, the length, and the cost of the eviction court. Because again, you're never getting that back rent.
You're never getting it. You're never getting it back. So, and certain areas, demographics, socioeconomic, where I manage a lot of buildings in C-grade areas in Long Beach. And I know for certain that trying to chase that money is another waste of time. That I think a lot of landlords at this point are thinking like I do. We just want our keys and just move on.
Hmm.
Maybe you might have a little better chance in a demographic that, they care about their credit and, they may be trying to buy a house in the next few years. They don't want a ding or whatever. But by and large, I'm just looking for the keys.
Hmm.
And where I think you come in and make a huge amount of sense is I'm now looking at it like when the day that I go to file that eviction with the attorney, I'm thinking $10,000. So I've got a window that's something under that, or maybe even a little over that to spend on the buyout,
Hmm.
dollars and cents. So let's say I had met you a little earlier in the second half of last year, and I said, "Hey, I'm about to file on this guy. Tell me what I should do differently if I went your route." Because the reason I kind of asked this question, it sounds like a dumb question, is because I've done a couple of these and I know other landlords have, but it's probably not in this state. Everything you do, you have to watch what you say, how you say it, I's dotted, T's
Hmm.
crossed. So the ones I've done are really makeshift and didn't really follow any kind of process. So I called you 6 months ago and said, "Hey, Sasha, what can you do for me? How do I begin that process?"
So typically when a client has like this tenant with a rent debt, depending on where they're at, like you do Long Beach, LA City now has this new like minimum threshold. But let's just assume the tenant's racked up quite a bit of debt. Either I would go and try to negotiate it, or have a consultation with you and give you some pointers. But I would basically, the goal would be offer the tenant waiver of rent, maybe give them back the security deposit, and start the conversation of how do we avoid going to court and how do we get the keys back, and make it abundantly clear, I'm going to offer this to you once. So I'm going to make this a one-time like effort with you. I'll give you a week to come up with a deal with that, with me, property manager. If I don't get one, I'm going to proceed with eviction. And that's valid in the sense that you owe the rent money tenant. So I'm trying to avoid that. Putting deadlines on it makes it so the tenant doesn't, can't be squeamish about it. But the thing with certain localities, like Long Beach is different from Los Angeles City, which is different from Los Angeles County, which is different from like Santa Monica. So if you were to do this in Long Beach, they don't have any sort of buyout program with the city. Their housing doesn't have that. So you would do the buyout. It'd be an agreement. The agreement is drafted in such a way that it can be enforced by the landlord in eviction court anyways, which of course we're trying to avoid, but all things given, the idea is that this is a mutually agreeable thing. And the tenant is going to move out and not be owed this money so long as they comply. If you have something like LA City, this is a buyout that would get filed with the city. The tenant does have 30 days in LA City to revoke this agreement. That being said, if they revoke it, the money is still owed. So tenants have skin in this game, in the sense, I'm forgiving this so long as you move. If you don't move, this is not being forgiven, and then we're both going to court. So it's an opportunity for us to avoid that, because if we go to court, I, the landlord, am not going to be so inclined to be a neutral reference for you. I'm going to go to court, and that's going to be that, and it could possibly go on your record. And you're going to be fighting a bunch of uncertainty. So this is something that it gives also the tenant the opportunity, like if you mean well and you really want housing, you'll get somewhat of a clean slate after this.
And the thing that I struggle with is you look at, the psychological side you've got to get past as a landlord, because you're going, "Hey, I didn't do anything and I'm going to start shelling out all this money," and it just doesn't feel right. And I have to even keep reminding myself, you're looking for the least resistant path to get those keys back. And
the main cities, there's LA City, LA County, unincorporated, Pasadena, which is really hardcore now, Santa Monica, West Hollywood, Culver City, Inglewood. Those are like the big ones that have rent control boards, that have these buyout rules. I do many presentations with different brokerages, with AGLA, where Dan Ukelson's from. I have a webinar coming up in April, which if you keep posted on AGLA, they'll probably post on the website. But there's different rules for different cities when it comes to buyouts. So this would be something that would fall under a buyout. So if you don't know, you should talk to an attorney to make sure that you're going about it the right way.
From what you do, it sounds like a no-brainer kind of mentality to it, because you already know if the negotiation you undertake with the tenant fails, then you're going to be in the same spot, maybe just a month or something further behind, which at this point you're already kind of messed up overall. What do you recommend they do? I guess the question in two parts. If somebody says, hey, I feel pretty comfortable, maybe like I would, to go about the negotiation process. I think I heard maybe you have the forms to arm us to do that. And then I think you told me that maybe, you had a landlord that didn't want to have their hands on the controls, that you would actually intermediate the buyout.
So I would say the first step is if you have the situation, you have a tenant that's not paying rent or is being some sort of nuisance or, a penumbra of things, is a lot of times people reach out to me and we do like an initial consultation. So I go over a strategy, whether, and I have to get a lot of information from you to figure out, does it make sense for you to go in, or does it make sense that we have someone else come in, like, me as a third party? So then we come up with a whole strategy about it. If it's that you're budget constrained, but you do have a relationship with this tenant, you're very familiar with them, you do self-manage or you're involved in management, then it might make sense for you to have a very, one-on-one, blunt but cordial conversation about, hey, you owe a lot of money. I could file an eviction, but I'd rather see if we can pursue this avenue where we'll do a voluntary, buyout, lease termination agreement. Here's what I'm willing to offer you. We have to, come to a resolution, within a week, within 2 weeks, you need to have this done. And then if, you as a landlord strike this deal with the tenant, you could come back to me and then I can draft the agreement that's compliant, file it if it needs to be filed. I've only had, like, out of all the buyouts I've done, I've only had 2 where the tenants didn't move. And that was during COVID and they simply couldn't find places to live. And they could cancel the agreement, so they basically did. Other than that, all the buyouts that I've dealt with, the tenants move. They move, they get their money when they move out. So a lot of the times, the tenants understand the weight of the agreement that they're signing. And, they enter the negotiations with the intent to actually honor what they're doing. So for the most part, if you have a tenant that's not paying rent, they know it. And so it doesn't hurt to ask, can we do this? Can we agree to a move out, rather than going through the eviction court? And you'd be surprised the number of tenants that go, okay, yeah.
Well, they got
to want an out. They want an out. They know that they owe it. I'll waive it, give you the security deposit back, which I don't have to give you, but, fine. Let me do an inspection of the unit, make sure there's no malicious damage, but okay. And so a lot of times I think these things could be done. And I think a lot of landlords haven't done them because there's like so much, if the tenant owes you a lot of money, it's really hard to emotionally be like, okay, I'll forgive it. I'll write you a check, but you end up doing that in court. And so
6 of 1. Yeah, 6 of 1, and that's the mentality you got to have. And I've heard some exorbitant quotes. Maybe you gave me one, and maybe a client of mine said the tenant was trying to get, $30,000. Well, I don't think that makes much sense in light of, the 10 plus the time that you'd spend on the eviction. But it's definitely seems like a no-brainer. And the next one I have, I'll definitely be calling you. Hopefully that's not for some time. Are you going to attend the AGLA Expo in Pasadena? I think it's May 15th.
Yes, I'll be there.
Good. So love to meet you there. I'll put your contact information, website. Those videos were great. I think anybody that's kind of curious about how this stuff works and wants to be entertained, they can get both of that from your website, but the information will be in the show notes. And I super duper appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
One last note, I mentioned the AGLA 2024 Income Property Management Exposition. That's going to be held on Wednesday, May 15th, obviously 2024. That's going to be in Pasadena at the Pasadena Convention Center. And if you haven't been to this event before, they put on a really good one. They'll have a ton of exhibitors, but not only that, industry specific vendors, of course. They also have breakout sessions and speakers. It's definitely a good investment of part of your day. So if you'd like to check that out and get more information, please visit Income Property Expo, all spelled out INCOMEPROPERTYEXPO.com, and check it out. Should be a great way to learn more and rub elbows with some other owners and look at the latest vendor products and services that are out there. You've been listening to the Everything Apartments podcast. I'm your host, Eric Christopher. Stay tuned for another episode coming soon.